Number 10. Napoleon wasn't short. Let's start with one of the most famous insecurities in history. If you ask anyone to describe Napoleon Bonaparte, they will tell you two things. One, he was a French military genius who loved a good hat. And two, he was an angry little man. We even have a psychological complex named after him. The Napoleon complex is basically the scientific term for a guy driving a lifted truck with oversized tires to compensate for his vertical challenges. But here is the truth. Napoleon was not short. In fact, he was actually slightly above average height for a Frenchman in the early 1800s. So why does the entire world think he was tiny? You can blame the metric system and British propaganda. See, back then, the French used a measurement called the French foot, which was actually longer than the British foot. When Napoleon's height was recorded as 5 feet 2 inches in the French system, the British newspapers saw that number and ran with it. They did not bother converting it. In modern British or American measurements, he was actually about 5 feet 7 inches. That is roughly the same height as movie stars like Tom Cruise or Robert Downey Jr. And you don't see historians calling Iron Man a tiny little elf. The British press spent years drawing cartoons of Little Boney, throwing tantrums, just to annoy him. It is the historical equivalent of Photoshop trolling. He conquered most of Europe, but he could not conquer a simple unit conversion error. Number 9. Sharks are older than trees. This fact sounds like I am making it up, but check the fossil record. When you think of ancient nature, you probably picture a big, majestic oak tree standing in a forest. It feels timeless, but compared to sharks, trees are basically the new hipster coffee shop that just opened down the street. Sharks have been swimming in the ocean for about 400 million years. Trees, on the other hand, did not show up until about 350 million years ago. That means sharks spent 50 million years swimming around a planet that was basically covered in giant mushrooms and moss. To put that in perspective, that is like finding out your grandfather is younger than your iPhone. It gets even crazier. Sharks are also older than the rings of Saturn. Astronomers believe Saturn's rings formed within the last 100 million years. So, sharks were hunting in the dark ocean waters while Saturn was just a naked beige ball floating in space. Nature looked at the shark design 400 million years ago and said, "Yep, nailed it. No notes. It is the perfect eating machine." Meanwhile, everything else on Earth has been frantically evolving and changing just to keep up. So the next time you see a Shark Week documentary, show some respect to your elders. Number 8. You have way more than 5 senses. We all remember kindergarten. The teacher sat you down and taught you the big 5. Sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. It is a nice, simple list. It fits perfectly on one hand. It is also a complete lie. Neurologists estimate that humans actually have anywhere between 9 and 20 distinct senses, depending on how you classify them. And you are using them right now without even realizing it. Let's try a test. Close your eyes. Now, take your finger and touch the tip of your nose. You did not need to see your hand to know where it was, did you? That is not magic. That is a sense called proprioception. It is your body's ability to know where your limbs are in space. Without it, you would be flopping around like a rag doll every time the lights went out. Then there is equilibrioception, which is your sense of balance. It is basically an internal gyroscope inside your ears. If that sense fails, you feel like the room is spinning after a long night at the bar, even if you are lying perfectly still on the floor. You also have thermoception, which detects heat and cold, and nociception, which is specifically for pain. Thinking you only have 5 senses is like buying a smartphone and thinking it can only make phone calls. Your body is a high-tech machine with sensors everywhere. The school system just didn't want to explain the complicated ones to a room full of 5-year-olds. Number 7. Strawberries are not berries, but watermelons are. If you thought the definition of short or senses was confusing, wait until you meet the botanists. These people have taken the English language and thrown it into a wood chipper. Scientifically speaking, for a fruit to be a berry, it must develop from a single flower with one ovary, and it usually has seeds on the inside. That seems reasonable. But then you look at a strawberry. Where are the seeds? They are on the outside. That is a deal breaker. A strawberry is technically an aggregate fruit. It is basically an imposter wearing a red dress. But it gets worse. A raspberry? Not a berry. A blackberry? Not a berry. Now, let's look at what actually counts as a berry. A banana. Yes, a banana is a berry. It has tiny seeds inside, and it grows from a single flower. An avocado? That is a berry. A watermelon? That is a giant, heavy, water-filled berry. Even a pumpkin is technically a berry. This is like finding out that your family dog is actually a cat, and the cat is actually a small horse. Nothing makes sense. So next time you're making a fruit salad, just know that you are living a lie. If you want a scientifically accurate berry smoothie, you should be blending bananas, pumpkins, and cucumbers. But please, do not actually do that. It sounds terrible. Number 6. Mount Everest is not the tallest mountain. We all know the trivia. Mount Everest, the roof of the world, the highest peak on Earth. Climbers pay tens of thousands of dollars to stand in a line, freezing their toes off just to reach the summit. But is it actually the tallest mountain? Well, it depends on where you start measuring. Everest is the highest point above sea level. It reaches about 29,000 feet into the sky. But that is measuring from the ocean up. That is like measuring a basketball player's height while he is standing on a chair. It is cheating. If we measure from the absolute base of the mountain to the peak, the winner is Mauna Kea in Hawaii. Most of Mauna Kea is hidden underwater. If you drained the Pacific Ocean, Mauna Kea would rise over 33,000 feet from the ocean floor. It is an absolute beast of a mountain, but it is too humble to show off. But wait, there is another contender. The Earth is not a perfect sphere. It bulges in the middle like a guy who eats too much fast food. Because of this equatorial bulge, the peak of Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador is technically the furthest point from the center of the Earth. If you are standing on Chimborazo, you are closer to outer space than anyone standing on Everest. So, Everest is famous because it has a good PR team. But if you want to be closest to the stars, go to Ecuador. It is warmer there anyway. Number 5. The T-Rex is closer to the iPhone than to the Stegosaurus. Our brains are terrible at comprehending time. We tend to lump all dinosaurs into one big mental folder labeled giant lizards from the past. We imagine the Stegosaurus fighting the Tyrannosaurus Rex, while a pterodactyl flies overhead. This is entirely the fault of Hollywood movies and toy sets. In reality, the Stegosaurus lived about 150 million years ago. It went extinct long before the T-Rex ever showed up. The T-Rex lived about 66 million years ago, right at the end of the dinosaur age. Do the math. The gap between the Stegosaurus and the T-Rex is roughly 84 million years. The gap between the T-Rex and you holding your smartphone right now is only 66 million years. That means the Tyrannosaurus Rex is historically closer to seeing a Justin Bieber concert than it is to seeing a live Stegosaurus. The T-Rex missed the Stegosaurus party by almost 100 million years. Thinking they lived together is like thinking Cleopatra hung out with the astronauts who landed on the moon. The timeline of Earth is terrifyingly long, and we are just a tiny blip at the very end. Number 4. Trees are made of air, not dirt. Go look at a massive redwood tree. It weighs thousands of pounds. It is solid wood, bark, and leaves. Where did all that mass come from? The obvious answer is the ground. It is sitting in dirt, so it must eat the dirt to get big, right? Wrong. If trees ate dirt, there would be a massive hole around every tree where it scooped up the soil. But the ground level usually stays the same. In the early 1600s, a scientist named Jean-Baptiste van Helmont proved this. He planted a willow tree in a pot of soil. He weighed the soil perfectly. 5 years later, the tree had gained 160 pounds. The soil? It had lost only 2 ounces. So where did the tree come from? It came from the air. Through photosynthesis, trees take carbon dioxide from the air, keep the carbon to build their trunks and branches, and spit out the oxygen for us to breathe. A tree is basically crystallized air. It is spinning invisible gas into solid wood using nothing but sunlight. It is biological alchemy. That log you burn in your fireplace? That is just years of trapped ghost breath being released back into the wild. Number 3. You are 99.999% empty space. You feel solid, don't you? You can stomp your foot on the floor. You can punch a wall. You feel like a coherent chunk of matter. But physics has some bad news for your ego. You are mostly nothing. Everything is made of atoms. An atom has a nucleus in the middle and electrons buzzing around the outside. But the distance between the nucleus and the electrons is vast. To give you a sense of scale, imagine a football stadium. If the nucleus of an atom were a marble sitting on the 50-yard line, the electrons would be tiny fruit flies buzzing around the very top row of the bleachers. Everything in between the marble and the fruit flies is empty space. That is what you are made of. Empty stadiums. If you removed all the empty space from the atoms that make up the entire human race, all 8 billion of us, you could fit the physical matter of humanity inside a single sugar cube. Granted, that sugar cube would weigh about as much as a mountain and would probably cause a cataclysmic explosion, but it would fit in your pocket. You are basically a ghost that has convinced itself it is real. Number 2. There are more trees on Earth than stars in the Milky Way. I know I have been hitting you with some existential dread, So let's do a surprisingly positive one. When you look up at the night sky in a rural area, you see thousands of stars. We are told the galaxy is massive, containing anywhere between 100 billion and 400 billion stars. It is a number so big our brains just shut down. But right here on Earth, nature is putting up even bigger numbers. A study from Yale University estimated that there are approximately 3 trillion trees currently living on our planet. That is trillion with a T. That is roughly 8 times more trees on Earth than there are stars in our galaxy. It is easy to feel like we have paved over the entire world with parking lots and Walmarts, but the planet is still incredibly green. Of course, we used to have almost twice that many trees before humans started chopping them down to make furniture and junk mail. But still, 3 trillion is a staggeringly huge number. Think of it this way. For every star you could possibly see with a telescope in our galaxy, there are about 8 trees down here silently judging you for not recycling. Number 1. You have never touched anything. This is the one that will keep you awake at night. You think you are sitting on a chair. You think you are holding your phone. You think your feet are touching the ground. You are wrong. Remember those atoms we talked about? The ones with the electrons buzzing around? Well, electrons have a negative charge. And as you learned in middle school science, charges repel each other. When you reach out to touch a table, the electrons in your finger are pushing against the electrons in the table. The force of that repulsion becomes so strong that your atoms never actually touch the table's atoms. You are hovering. The sensation of touch that you feel is just your brain interpreting the magnetic pressure of that repulsion. The distance is incredibly small. We are talking nanometers, but it is there. You are technically levitating on a microscopic force field everywhere you go. This means you have never truly hugged anyone. You have never high-fived your best friend. You have never even touched your own face. You are perpetually trapped in a suit of atomic armor that keeps you isolated from the rest of the universe. So, the next time you feel lonely, just remember, physics makes sure you are always kept at a safe distance. You aren't antisocial. You're just obeying the laws of the quantum universe. And that is our countdown. If your brain hurts a little bit, that just means the information is working. Which fact made you question your reality the most? Was it the T-Rex timeline or the fact that you are mostly empty space? Let me know in the comments. I'm going to go try to walk through a wall since I'm 99% nothing anyway. I'll see you in the next one.